Welcome to This Explainer. Look, if you've ever walked through your front door after a totally normal social event, tossed your keys on the counter and just exhaled like you've been holding your breath for the last 3 hours, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're unpacking the fascinating, kind of hidden psychology behind why you feel exactly this way.
Because, let's be real, society has probably been feeding you a very specific story your entire life. The story goes that if you'd rather stay in on a Saturday night than go to a crowded party, or if you regularly say no to invitations just to sit in an empty room, well, there must be something you need to fix. People ask if you're depressed, if you're antisocial, or if you're just waiting for the right crowd to finally bring you out of your shell. But as we dive into the research, a truly brilliant reality emerges. You aren't broken, you're not damaged, and you're not missing some crucial social chip that everyone else seems to have. You might simply be built differently. And today, we're going to explore the exact science of why.
We live in a loud, incredibly overstimulating world that basically demands constant performance. Schools reward the loudest kids, and workplaces promote the non-stop networkers, right? It's a society that treats your desire for solitude like it's a symptom of a problem. But psychological reality, it tells a completely different story. Science actually shows us that for a specific segment of the population, solitude isn't just a quirky preference or a passing phase. It is a biological, evolutionary requirement. It's a highly developed mental framework that researchers are literally just beginning to truly understand.
And to understand just how rare this mental framework actually is, we have to look at a study conducted back in 2014 at the University of Virginia. Psychologists ran an experiment that honestly sounds almost like a joke. They placed participants in an empty room for just 15 minutes. There were no phones, no books, no music, no distractions whatsoever. Just the person, left entirely alone with their own thoughts. The only alternative they were given was a button they could press that would deliver a mild electric shock.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the results. They are absolutely staggering. A massive 66% of the men and 25% of the women actually chose to voluntarily shock themselves. Some did it multiple times. Physical pain was literally more tolerable to them than spending 15 minutes sitting in silence with their own brains. Think about that for a second. If you are someone whose brain doesn't immediately panic and search for the exit the second the noise stops, if your mind actually settles down and explores when things get quiet, you possess an incredibly rare psychological trait.
So, if your brain is built to actually thrive in that quiet, depriving it of that space causes real harm. We all know the word loneliness, right? But researchers have recently pinpointed a concept called aloneliness. This is the actual measurable psychological distress that happens when you don't get enough time to yourself. Your need for solitude is as legitimate and biological as hunger or sleep. When you don't get it, you feel it in your mood, your patience, and your overall ability to think straight.
So what is your brain actually doing when you are alone? A lot of people assume that sitting in silence means your brain is just idling, waiting for something to happen. But neuroscientists found the exact opposite. Stepping away from the noise activates what's called your default mode network. This is a powerful system that switches on specifically during inward reflection. It processes emotions, consolidates memories, and generates creative insights. In fact, research out of Harvard shows the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for complex decision-making, displays significantly higher activity when you're alone. Your brain doesn't turn off in the quiet. It actually switches its most sophisticated processes on.
And honestly, this perfectly explains why socializing exhausts you. You don't have less social energy, you just spend it completely differently. The brilliant neuroscientist Hans Eisenstock spent decades studying this. He found that people who prefer solitude operate at a much higher baseline of internal stimulation. When you're in a conversation, you aren't just skimming it like a push notification, you are deeply tracking the subtext, what's being said, what's not being said, those slight hesitations. Social input doesn't energize you because it's stacking on top of a system that is already running incredibly complex background processes.
Which beautifully connects to the research of psychologist Elaine Aron. She figured out that roughly 15 to 20% of the population has what's called heightened sensory processing sensitivity. 20%. That means your nervous system is literally calibrated to pick up frequencies that 80% of the world doesn't even know exist.
Just imagine walking into a room and instantly absorbing everything around you, literally without even trying. You read the micro-expressions. You feel the unsaid tension between two people who just had an argument. You sense the grief someone brought into the room but didn't even mention. You are basically functioning like a human sponge for emotional contagion. By the end of a regular day, you aren't just carrying your own emotions, you're carrying fragments of everyone else's. Solitude isn't you running away. It's the only place you can go to wring out the sponge and finally return to your own baseline signal.
Now, I do want to introduce a really important psychological caveat here. We kind of have to be honest with ourselves, because these two realities can look exactly the same from the outside. Are you choosing solitude because it's a healing, peaceful space where your mind does its absolute best work? Or are you using it defensively, like a shield? For some folks, early environments taught their nervous system that connection was unpredictable, or required suppressing their true needs. If your solitude is a trauma response because connection feels just too dangerous, that's absolutely worth exploring. But if your solitude feels like freedom, it is a profoundly healthy choice.
And this is where the research takes a fascinating turn. Wait, what? Most of us assume that loving solitude just automatically means you're an introvert, but psychologist Nada Weinstein found a serious flaw in that assumption. Her research showed that introversion is not actually a reliable predictor of wanting solitude. Plenty of extroverts actively crave it too. What really drives the love for alone time is the deep, core psychological need for autonomy. It's the intense desire to direct your own attention at your own pace without having to manage anyone else's expectations.
Because you prize that autonomy so much, the way you approach relationships is entirely different. A really cool study out of the University of Rochester found that people with the highest capacity for solitude actually report the highest quality relationships. Crazy, right? Well, not really, because you don't collect people out of desperation. You curate them. You don't tolerate shallow interactions or hang out with someone just because you're terrified of the silence. When you choose to let someone into your life, it's genuine. You communicate honestly, you don't perform, and you value deep quality over a huge quantity of surface-level friends.
And historically, this capacity for solitude has actually been the engine of human progress. Researcher Gregory Feist looked at highly creative people across arts, sciences, and engineering. The one unifying trait wasn't raw IQ, it was their intense need for solitude. Isaac Newton revolutionized physics while isolating during the plague. Nikola Tesla totally refused group work, claiming his best ideas arrived on long, solitary walks. Carl Jung built a literal stone tower in Switzerland with no electricity, just to have the space to think. Their minds actually required the absence of external input to make those unexpected, brilliant connections. Which brings us to this incredibly powerful reality. The person who can sit alone and feel at peace is truly the freest person in the world. Think about it. If you don't need constant applause, you become incredibly resilient. If you don't desperately crave constant company, you can't be pressured or controlled. If you don't need external validation, you cannot be easily swayed by the crowd. You naturally develop strict boundaries because you highly value your time and your peace. Instead of bending to the demands of the room, you become grounded and secure in exactly who you are.
Carl Jung actually gave us the perfect word for this withdrawal. He called it individuation. Basically, society installs this pre-programmed script in us from birth. You know, what to want, what success looks like, how to act. But highly perceptive people, they eventually see the script for what it is. The masking, the endless small talk, the simplifying of complex thoughts, it becomes mentally damaging. So they quietly step back. This isn't burnout, and it definitely isn't failure. Individuation is the powerful psychological process of leaving a rigged game so you can finally do the real, authentic work of becoming who you actually are.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to chew on. The next time you feel that deep pull to step away from the crowd, to decline an invitation, to just sit in the quiet of your own space, ask yourself this: are you hiding from the world, or are you just building your tower? The world will always reward the loudest person in the room, for sure. But remember, the deepest, most world-changing work happens in the silence. Embrace your superpower. Thanks for joining me, and keep building your tower.